You're back on the air with We Sell Restaurants, the industry leader in restaurants for sale, franchise restaurant resales, and site location for the food service industry. We currently have offices in Florida, Colorado, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, and we're recruiting in select markets for new franchisees for our exploding brand. Today, we're talking about restaurant etiquette. We have Suzanne Wind, author of The Smart Playbook, executive chef Ivan Flowers, and Cynthia Roden, an etiquette consultant. Eric, you got a question for this great panel?
Absolutely. I'd like to ask Ivan, another big thing in the restaurant is substitutions. People want to substitute for different things all the time. And, how do you handle that? What's the best way to do that? Do you allow them? Do you say this is restricted? Ivan, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, people like to modify. And in the olden days, if you said, can I have the green beans on this plate instead of that? Oh, we have to check with the chef. What we do is we know that we want to modify up to a certain point. In other words, everything is done a la minute, so the cooking is done in the moment. So we're able to do vegetarian, lactose intolerant, vegan, low salt, no salt, any of that right on the line in the moment. So that's not a problem. And we'll get that. People are on diet. There's elderly. Food has to be, done a certain way. It's not a problem. We're trained to do that. It's when somebody will take combinations of three different things and say, I want this split three ways, and I want a third of this, a third of this, a third of that put on the plate, where they're really kind of not being proper. That's when we say, wait a second, or it's going to cost this much because there's a lot of labor involved in that. And that's very far and few between. But we try to honor most modifications as long as it's not so excessive, because if it was, you'd never be able to run a service, because every ticket and every dish is so modified that you'd be in a different different space. Well,
that also plays havoc with your food costs and your portion controls and all those elements as well. If your standard protein is 9 or 12 ounces and somebody wants a third of this and a third of that, then you're left with some portion that's unsellable for the next party.
Absolutely. Good point.
So let's talk a little bit about something, because I have to tell you, I'm a bit of a dining klutz, and this has happened to me more times than I want to count. I drop my fork or tip over my glass. So, Cynthia, what are your recommendations? How should I handle that, aside from being horrifically embarrassed?
I usually applaud, but I know it's not the right thing, correct?
Well, it happens to everyone. And it's funny what I see. I do a lot of dining etiquette with college students and actually even a lot of stockbrokers. And when they spill something, the first reaction is like, oh, my gosh, I can't believe I've spilled something. But they forget to actually pick up the glass. So the first thing is stop the bleeding, pick up the glass, and then, sort of make a little dam with your napkin so it's not spilling all over the place. And, usually at that point, a server has seen you, or you can signal a server to help you, mop up the mess, and just to remain calm and just, don't cry over spilled milk. It'll all work out just fine. And if you drop a utensil, please don't pick it up and put it back on the table. Just alert your server that you've dropped a utensil and let them pick it up and bring you a new one. Or I always tell my students, if for some reason you drop something and it is in the way where someone could trip over it, just try and, tuck it under your chair out of the way so it is not an obstruction.
Great tips.
Anybody want to add on that?
Well, I just think, in all those type of situations, it's basically just handle the situation with respect and kindness, and be apologetic.
So Eric should not laugh at me, right?
I guess that's correct. I will have to apologize.
Yeah, exactly.
And I apologize officially to Robin, and I will not laugh and clap anymore. Thank you, guys. Question now about, we talk about the check, and we see that this is always an awkward moment. You're either with clients, business associates, family, and your server, your person taking care of your table is coming back, and they have this little magic, envelope in their hands and look at like, okay, who's the lucky one? And it's always an awkward moment because three people say, I want it, I don't want it. What's one of the best way to handle that? Or do you handle it up front? Do you tell your servers on the side? What do we do with the check, basically?
Suzanne, kick us off.
Well, that's a tough one. I would say, I always think, the check is usually traditionally handed to the older person at the table. And then I would just, see what I guess the server would just see who seems to go for the check. You put it down.
Okay, Cynthia, what do you think?
I think it really depends on, who you're dining with and what the situation is. If you're inviting someone to a business lunch, you could always talk to the hostess prior and say, I'm hosting this business lunch and that I'm going to be the one taking care of the check, and you could make arrangements to take care of the check after you're finished with the meal, and then it never arrives at the table, and then it doesn't become sort of an awkward situation. Or if you're with friends and you all are going to be dining on separate checks, just say, we'd like to have this all on separate checks at the very beginning. This way the server doesn't have to take a lot of time toward the end to sort everything out, who had what. I think it's just, just to be polite and to have open communication about it, because it can be a very awkward situation.
I agree, and I've seen large parties go out and maybe somebody only has tea or coffee, and then someone else is ordering 3 cocktails, and then you get a check and there's 10 people at the table, and it's not really appropriate for it to be split 10 ways, particularly for young people. So I think asking for that division up front is smart, and it also takes a lot of effort off the wait staff if they know in advance, Ivan, right? Because the POS systems can easily handle the way the menu, the way the orders are input, so that the checks can be split out, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Communication in the front saves you everything on the back. So who's splitting what, who had what, who's going to take the check. A good server can read a table, and percent of the time they know who the check's going to. If you're unsure, you can actually say, if you don't have a read on the table, or let's say you're just not sure, and who can I present it? You can actually ask if you're unsure. But 90% of the time, that hand will come up if that check comes in, and it works most of the time. As far as, unfair splitting, I'm very old school. My dad was a chef, and I remember going out to dinners, and, when there were people that, I had a Diet Coke and you had two, my father would just pay for the check. He'd say, just give it to me, and I've got it, because he would never want to go through accounting at a table.
I love that advice.
Yeah.
What a gracious man.
Always pick up the check.
I agree with that. I mean, definitely, you don't want to. It just makes the meal end at it, not.
We are out of time, and this has been such a great week. We've been talking with a wonderful panel on the etiquette of restaurants. Remember, you can find this show and many others online at WeSellRestaurants.com. Take a moment, like us on Facebook at Facebook.com, We Sell Restaurants, and we'll be right back after this short break.